The morning mist clung to the grass airfield at Boscombe Down like a shroud, carrying with it the acrid smell of high-octane fuel and the metallic tang of fear. Squadron leader James "Hawk" Harrison adjusted his oxygen mask with trembling fingers, his eyes fixed on the sleek silhouette before him, a modified Supermarine Spitfire that promised to change the course of the war, yet whispered death with every gleaming rivet. The date was March 15, 1943, and this machine represented 18 months of desperate innovation. Britain's finest engineers had pushed the boundaries of aerodynamics and engine design, creating what they believed would be the ultimate fighter aircraft. But 5 test pilots had already paid the ultimate price for this genius upgrade, their names now etched in stone rather than glory. Harrison's weathered hands gripped the cockpit frame as he prepared to become the 6th. The modified Merlin engine's roar seemed different today, hungrier, more violent. His mechanic, Tommy Walsh, a working-class Londoner whose own brother had perished in one of these experimental flights, watched with hollow eyes that had seen too much death disguised as progress. "She's got the devil's own appetite, sir," Tommy whispered, his Cockney accent thick with barely contained emotion. "Maybe today's the day she finally gets fed proper." Something in the young man's tone made Harrison pause. Was it resignation? Or something darker? A knowledge that went beyond mechanical expertise? As the engine reached its crescendo, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that this morning's test flight would reveal truths that some were desperate to keep buried, truths that would shatter everything he believed about duty, sacrifice, and the price of victory. The control tower's green flare pierced the morning gloom. It was time to discover whether genius and death were truly inseparable, or if something far more sinister lurked behind this string of unfortunate accidents. The genesis of the killer Spitfire began in the desperate winter of 1941, when Britain stood alone against the Luftwaffe's relentless assault. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding's fighter command was bleeding pilots faster than training schools could replace them. In the sterile corridors of the Royal Aircraft Establishment, Chief Engineer Dr. Margaret Thornfield, one of the few women in her position, worked 18-hour days alongside her team, driven by a personal vendetta against the war that had claimed her husband over London. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, captured German documents revealing the Luftwaffe's development of high-altitude interceptors. Thornfield's team realized that standard Spitfires would soon be obsolete. Their solution was audacious, a radical engine modification that would increase power output by 40%, coupled with experimental wing modifications that promised unprecedented climb rates. But the project carried shadows from its inception. Flight Lieutenant David Chin, the program's first test pilot, had been Thornfield's protégé before the war, a brilliant Cambridge engineering graduate turned aviator whose passion for flight matched her own dedication to design. Their professional relationship had slowly transformed into something deeper, something that made every test flight a personal agony for Thornfield. Chen's death had been sudden and inexplicable. The aircraft had simply disintegrated at 28,000 feet, pieces scattered across the English countryside like confetti from hell. The official report cited structural failure under extreme stress, but Chen's final radio transmission haunted everyone who heard it. "The controls, they're not responding. It's like she wants to." The transmission ended in static and screaming metal. 4 more pilots followed Chen into oblivion. Squadron leader Robert MacLeod, a Scottish veteran of the Battle of Britain whose steady nerves had earned him legendary status. Flying Officer Anthony "Ace" Pemberton, barely 19 but already credited with 12 kills. Flight Sergeant William Kowalski, a Polish refugee whose family had died in the Warsaw bombing. And most recently, Wing Commander Charles Blackwood, whose father sat on the Air Ministry's top-secret committee, overseeing the project. Each death brought the same pattern: catastrophic failure at high altitude, complete loss of control, and final radio transmissions that spoke of something beyond mechanical malfunction. Yet the program continued, driven by wartime desperation and the terrible mathematics of acceptable losses. Harrison knew all 5 men personally. Chen had been his roommate at flying school. MacLeod had taught him advanced combat tactics. Pemberton reminded him painfully of his younger brother, currently missing over North Africa. The weight of their deaths sat heavy on his chest as he prepared for what many whispered would be his own funeral flight. But there were whispers of something else, darker rumors that suggested the failures weren't entirely accidental. Tommy Walsh had worked on all 6 aircraft, and his increasingly erratic behavior hadn't gone unnoticed. Late-night conversations with German prisoners of war, suspicious absences during critical maintenance periods, and a bank account that seemed unusually healthy for a mechanic's salary had caught the attention of military intelligence. As Harrison strapped himself into the cockpit, he wondered if he was flying into mechanical failure or deliberate murder. Hey everyone, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our global community of history enthusiasts. The conspiracy that would claim Harrison's life had been months in the making, orchestrated by a network that reached into the highest levels of British intelligence. Margaret Thornfield, consumed by grief over Chen's death and driven to the edge of sanity by 4 subsequent accidents, had begun her own investigation that would ultimately seal her fate. Her first breakthrough came through Chen's personal effects, which revealed coded messages hidden within seemingly innocent engineering notes. The cipher was sophisticated, far beyond what any British pilot should have known. When decoded, the messages revealed coordinates, dates, and most chillingly, detailed specifications of the Spitfire modifications, information that could only have come from inside the program itself. Thornfield's confrontation with Tommy Walsh in the dimly lit hangar had been electric with tension. The young mechanic, his boyish face now etched with lines of guilt and desperation, finally cracked under her relentless questioning. His confession poured out like poison from an infected wound. He had been recruited by German intelligence 2 years earlier, not through ideology but through brutal pragmatism. His younger sister had been captured during a failed SOE mission to occupied France. Her life was the price of his cooperation. "They don't want the planes shot down, ma'am," Walsh had whispered, his voice breaking. "They want them to fail in ways that teach them our weaknesses. Every death gives them more data, more understanding of how far we'll push our technology. They're learning from our failures faster than we're learning from our successes." The sabotage was elegant in its subtlety. Walsh had been gradually weakening specific structural components, creating failure points that would manifest only under extreme stress. Each crash provided the Germans with valuable intelligence about British engineering limits, pilot training procedures, and most importantly, the psychological impact on surviving test pilots and ground crews. But Thornfield's investigation had uncovered something even more sinister. Wing Commander Blackwood's father, Air Commodore Sir Reginald Blackwood, was not merely a passive victim of his son's death. Military intelligence had been tracking suspicious communications between his office and known German contacts through Swiss intermediaries. The elder Blackwood, facing financial ruin from gambling debts and a messy divorce, had been feeding strategic information to the enemy for over a year. The terrible irony was that Blackwood had unwittingly orchestrated his own son's death. When Charles volunteered for the test program, his father's German handlers saw an opportunity too valuable to pass up. The young pilot's death would provide both technical intelligence and a perfect cover for continued sabotage, who would suspect a grieving father of treason. Harrison's assignment to the 6th test flight was no coincidence. As one of the RAF's most experienced pilots and a close friend of all 5 victims, his psychological profile made him the perfect unwitting participant in the Germans' psychological warfare campaign. His inevitable death would demoralize the entire fighter command and potentially force the cancellation of the modification program. What neither the Germans nor their British collaborators anticipated was Harrison's own network of allies. Flight Sergeant Maria Santos, a Brazilian-born intelligence officer whose brother had died in the Atlantic convoys, had been conducting her own parallel investigation. Her access to intercepted German communications had revealed references to Operation Icarus, a systematic campaign to destroy British morale through the elimination of key personnel in high-profile accidents. Santos had also discovered that Thornfield was marked for elimination. The brilliant engineer's investigation had brought her too close to the truth, and Walsh's German handlers had given him new orders: ensure that both Thornfield and Harrison died in today's test flight, making it appear as though mechanical failure had claimed pilot and engineer simultaneously. As Harrison completed his pre-flight checks, Santos raced through the morning mist toward the airfield's communication tower, carrying evidence that would expose the conspiracy but might arrive too late to save the man she had come to love from afar. The engine's roar masked the sound of her desperate footsteps and the crack of Walsh's rifle as he took position in the shadows, his orders clear. If the sabotage failed to kill Harrison, more direct methods would be employed. If you're enjoying this incredible true story of wartime deception, please hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers and need your support to keep bringing you these hidden chapters of history. The Spitfire lifted off into the gray English sky at precisely 0847 hours, its modified engine producing a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the morning air. Harrison felt the familiar sensation of gravity releasing its hold, but something was wrong. The aircraft's response to his inputs felt sluggish, as if the machine was fighting his every command. At 15,000 feet, the first signs of sabotage manifested. A hairline crack appeared in the canopy, invisible from the ground but growing with each foot of altitude gained. Walsh's modifications were working exactly as designed, creating multiple failure points that would cascade into catastrophic destruction. But the mechanic's hands shook as he watched through his rifle scope, knowing that his sister's life hung in the balance of Harrison's death. In the communication tower, Santos burst through the door just as Harrison's voice crackled over the radio. "Control, experiencing some unusual vibrations. Instruments showing normal, but something feels off." Her evidence, photographs of the coded messages, bank records showing Walsh's payments, and intercepted German communications, scattered across the duty officer's desk like pieces of a deadly puzzle. "Abort the flight." Santos screamed into the microphone. "Harrison, you've been sabotaged. The aircraft has been compromised." But at 20,000 feet, Harrison's radio was already failing, another of Walsh's carefully planned modifications. Static filled his headphones as the structural failures accelerated. The port wing began to flex beyond its design limits, rivets popping like gunshots in the thin air. Thornfield, watching from the observation bunker, felt the familiar horror wash over her as she recognized the signs of impending disaster. But this time was different. This time, she was ready to act. Her own investigation had led her to the same conclusions as Santos, and she had spent the previous night preparing for this moment. The brilliant engineer had secretly installed a radio beacon in Harrison's aircraft, a device that would transmit his exact location and flight data even if his primary communications failed. More importantly, she had discovered Walsh's hiding place and the rifle he intended to use. As Harrison fought for control of the disintegrating aircraft above, Thornfield was locked in her own desperate battle with the saboteur below. The confrontation in the shadows of the hangar was brutal and brief. Walsh, driven to desperation by months of guilt and the knowledge that failure meant his sister's execution, fought with the fury of a cornered animal. But Thornfield's rage over 5 dead pilots and her determination to save Harrison gave her strength she never knew she possessed. The rifle discharged harmlessly into the hangar roof as she managed to overpower the younger man. "My sister," Walsh sobbed as Thornfield bound his hands with parachute cord. "They'll kill her if I don't. Your sister died 6 months ago," Thornfield said quietly, revealing intelligence that Santos had discovered but Walsh had never been told. "The Germans have been using photographs of her corpse to control you. You've been murdering innocent men for a ghost." At 28,000 feet, Harrison faced his own moment of truth. The aircraft was coming apart around him, but Santos's warning had reached him just before his radio died. Unlike his 5 predecessors, he knew this wasn't mechanical failure, it was murder. That knowledge changed everything. Instead of fighting the aircraft's increasingly erratic behavior, Harrison began working with it. His years of combat experience had taught him to adapt to damaged aircraft, to find ways to fly machines that shouldn't have remained airborne. The port wing was failing, but the starboard wing was still sound. The engine was overheating, but it still had power. Using techniques that would have seemed impossible to a less experienced pilot, Harrison began a controlled descent that turned the aircraft's structural failures into advantages. The damaged wing created drag that helped slow his descent. The overheating engine's reduced power prevented him from exceeding the airframe's compromised stress limits. But the real miracle was psychological. For the first time since this nightmare began, Someone was going to survive to tell the truth. As Harrison executed an emergency landing on a farmer's field 12 miles from Boscombe Down, his aircraft finally broke apart completely, the fuselage separating from the wings in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. But he walked away, battered and bloodied but alive, carrying evidence that would expose the conspiracy and save countless other lives. The sound of sirens filled the morning air as military police arrested Walsh and began the process of unraveling the network that had cost 5 good men their lives. The aftermath of Operation Icarus sent shockwaves through the highest levels of British command and revealed the true scope of German psychological warfare tactics. Harrison's survival had done more than expose a single conspiracy. It had unveiled an entire network of sabotage operations that reached across multiple RAF bases and research facilities. The interrogation of Tommy Walsh became a masterclass in the psychological manipulation employed by German intelligence. Over 3 grueling days, military interrogators peeled back layers of deception that revealed the sophisticated nature of Nazi infiltration tactics. Walsh's recruitment had begun not with ideology, but with carefully manufactured personal tragedy. His sister Sarah had indeed been captured during an SOE mission, but the Germans had staged elaborate, proof-of-life communications that continued long after her execution. Margaret Thornfield found herself at the center of a massive counterintelligence operation as British authorities worked to identify and eliminate similar networks across the war effort. Her engineering expertise proved invaluable in analyzing the sabotaged aircraft, revealing a pattern of failures so subtle that they had initially appeared to be the natural consequences of pushing technology beyond its limits. The psychological toll on the surviving team members was devastating. Thornfield struggled with overwhelming guilt, knowing that her romantic feelings for David Chen had blinded her to warning signs that might have saved his life. She had been so focused on the technical aspects of the failures that she had missed the human element entirely. The realization that Chen's death could have been prevented haunted her dreams and drove her to the edge of a nervous breakdown. Harrison's recovery was complicated by survivors' guilt that manifested in unexpected ways. Unlike the clean resolution that military officials preferred, his survival came with the burden of knowing that his 5 friends had died not as heroes pushing the boundaries of aviation, but as victims of a cruel deception. The knowledge that their deaths had served enemy interests rather than British victory poisoned what should have been a moment of triumph. The investigation into Air Commodore Sir Reginald Blackwood revealed the most heartbreaking aspect of the entire conspiracy. Financial records showed that his son Charles had been secretly sending money home to help with his father's mounting debts, unaware that his generosity was inadvertently funding his own murder. The elder Blackwood's arrest came just hours before he was scheduled to attend his son's memorial service. During his confession, Blackwood revealed the psychological pressure tactics employed by his German handlers. They had not simply blackmailed him with threats, they had carefully studied his personality and created a web of dependencies that made betrayal seem like the only viable option. The gambling debts were real, but they had been encouraged and enabled by German agents posing as wealthy bookmakers. His messy divorce had been complicated by a German operative who posed as a sympathetic confidant to his wife. The broader implications of Operation Icarus forced a complete revision of British security protocols. The realization that the Germans were more interested in psychological warfare than simple intelligence gathering changed how the military approached everything from pilot training to technology development. The enemy wasn't just trying to steal secrets, they were actively working to demoralize British personnel and destroy confidence in their own capabilities. Flight Sergeant Maria Santos emerged as one of the war's unsung heroes, her parallel investigation having prevented what intelligence analysts later determined would have been a cascade of similar operations across multiple theaters. Her work revealed that Operation Icarus was just one component of a larger German strategy designed to turn British strengths against themselves. The modified Spitfire program was ultimately cancelled, but not before Thornfield and her team incorporated the lessons learned into new designs that proved crucial in the later stages of the war. The tragic irony was that the modifications themselves were sound. It was human treachery, not engineering failure, that had turned innovation into a death trap. Tommy Walsh's final fate remained classified for decades. Rather than facing execution for treason, He was quietly transferred to a Special Operations Executive Unit where his knowledge of German psychological warfare tactics proved invaluable in developing countermeasures. His redemption came through a series of dangerous missions behind enemy lines, where he used his intimate understanding of Nazi manipulation techniques to turn captured German agents into double agents. The most profound consequence of the affair was its impact on how the British military understood the nature of modern warfare. The realization that the enemy was as interested in destroying morale as in achieving tactical victories led to the development of new psychological support systems for personnel involved in high-risk experimental programs. Harrison never flew test aircraft again, but his survival and testimony became the foundation for counterintelligence protocols that saved countless lives in subsequent operations. The man who should have been the sixth victim became instead the guardian angel of future test pilots, ensuring that their courage in pushing technological boundaries would never again be perverted into serving enemy interests. The memorial for the 5 dead pilots was delayed until the full truth could be revealed. When it finally took place 6 months later, their families learned that their loved ones had died not from mechanical failure or pilot error, but as casualties of a war that extended far beyond traditional battlefields into the realm of trust, loyalty, and the fundamental bonds that hold military units together. The true legacy of the genius Spitfire upgrade that killed 5 test pilots lies not in its technical failures, but in the profound human truths it revealed about courage, sacrifice, and redemption in the face of unthinkable betrayal. Harrison's survival became a testament to the power of knowledge and preparation over blind faith in authority, while Thornfield's relentless pursuit of truth honored the memory of those who had died believing they were advancing the cause of freedom. In the years following the war, the survivors found different paths to healing. Harrison became an advocate for pilot safety and psychological support systems, ensuring that future test pilots would never again face such dangers alone. Thornfield channeled her grief into revolutionary aircraft designs that helped establish Britain's post-war aviation industry. Santos rose through the intelligence ranks to become one of MI6's most effective counterintelligence officers, her experience with Operation Icarus serving as a template for identifying and neutralizing enemy psychological warfare operations. Even Tommy Walsh found a measure of peace, his later wartime service helping to rescue dozens of Allied prisoners from German camps. His intimate knowledge of Nazi psychological manipulation techniques proved invaluable in breaking enemy agents and protecting Allied personnel from similar exploitation. The story of these 5 deaths and 1 miraculous survival reminds us that the greatest battles are often fought not in the skies or on traditional battlefields, but in the human heart, where loyalty confronts betrayal, where duty conflicts with personal desire, and where the choice between courage and despair can determine the fate of nations. The pilots who died believing they were pushing the boundaries of aviation technology became unknowing martyrs to a larger truth, that in modern warfare, the human spirit itself becomes both weapon and target. Their sacrifice was not in vain, for it revealed vulnerabilities that, once exposed and addressed, could never again be exploited with such devastating effect. If you're fascinated by these hidden stories from World War II, tales of courage, betrayal, and redemption that shaped our world, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We're constantly uncovering incredible untold stories from history's most dramatic moments. Which story would you like us to explore next? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video to help us reach more history enthusiasts like yourself. Until next time, keep exploring the incredible true stories that textbooks never tell.